for One, Episode 8. This week we're talking about the Daedalus Sentence and Mechs versus Minions, plus how to tell when a game is worth the money. Welcome back to Episode 8 of Table for One. This is Anthony, and once again, we have a special guest this week, making a return after a very successful first time on the show a couple weeks ago. Jason, welcome back.
Yo, thank you for having me back.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a ton of fun last time, so figured why not do it again, especially since we're playing the same big old stuff this week.
Yep, let's do it.
Yeah, so the big old stuff that we're speaking of is one that there's no way you haven't heard of if you're in the board gaming hobby. And then another one that you maybe haven't heard of. It was a Kickstarter just recently released, and, you know, we'll talk about the price. But a couple different games. We're talking about them together because they are both very big. They are both relatively expensive, and they both have these solo modes that work, you know, okay, decently well. And we want to talk about how they play in general, what we thought, and then we're going to kind of segue that into a whole nother conversation about getting bang for your buck on these bigger games. I personally love the bigger games, especially solo. I like having something big set up on my table that I can play through, but how do you determine what's an okay amount of money to spend when you're looking at a game that you're going to be playing by yourself?
Yeah, I like the idea of just, you know, you save up your money and you have a little bit of room in your budget and you see something you like, you just go bam. And, you know, it's a, you know, big table presence. You know, you're going to spend basically the entire evening or multiple evenings on it. The one game you could sink your teeth in. Yeah, I mean, I know we talked about these tiny games last time I was on. We're going the opposite way, but yeah, this is what, yeah, these are fun.
Yeah, it's kind of the opposite. There's two different major modes that I get into, at least, when I'm playing solo games. Is I just want something quick to play while I'm watching TV. I got 30, 40 minutes. You know, grab an Oni game. Or I'm playing games today. It's a Saturday. I'm home by myself. Maybe everybody's out doing something. It's quiet. I'm like, all right, where's the iPad? Where's Netflix? I'm going to play something that uses the whole table. It takes 4 hours. And that's the kind of stuff we're going to talk about today and when it's worth it. But before diving into that, we want to talk about two games we've been playing recently. The first one, Daedalus Sentence. This is a recent Eagle Gryphon games release, and it was on Kickstarter about a year ago. Is that correct?
Earlier this year, I think.
Okay, so not quite a full year. And if it's not ringing a bell right now, it's this large circular board with pieces that kind of turn in a circle, and you are trying to basically escape this labyrinthine maze. Jason, I know you backed this. If you want to kind of give a quick rundown of how it, basically what it is and what makes it unique, at least.
Okay, yeah, no, it's a cooperative game. It's prison escape. So there's it, like Anthony was saying, it's a big circle, and the circle has a concentric wings. And the thing about this game that kind of draw that people that the Kickstarter really hammered home is that the board moves. So the concentric circles move, and there's guards that are on the circles so that you can kind of manipulate where the circles are going. So obviously you're kind of ducking and weaving and hiding and, you know, got to make it your way out of this circle. There's that, and there's also the programmable board. So the board was it's I'm going to talk about it in a second, but the board, based how it works is you have a bunch of cards, and, you know, the game is comprised basically all your actions are, you know, cards and stuff. The cards determine how the board rotates, and the card determines also how the patrol kind of paths. And you can kind of, you know, you go to different rooms, you kind of mess with it, you know. So like, you hack into their comm room, and yeah, instead of the patrol going here, they're going there. Instead of calling in a new guy, they're gonna turn left and walk into a wall. You can control that, you know. So the circular board, the kind of programmable pathing movement, those two elements together kind of make the game. And, you know, big table presence. I mean, I took this game to a recent meetup, and people were just like walking by. It's like, what is this? Look at that circular board, and, you know, cool colors, cool theme, kind of Spectropsy, you know, with that kind of futuristic escape mode. And we were all huddled together. So, like, you know, pretty fairly impressive, just kind of people walking by. So I think the Kickstarter really hammered that point home.
Yeah, no, it was successful at that. This is a game I looked at when it was on Kickstarter and was tempted to go for it. It looked big, it looked interesting. It was on that list of Kickstarter games that is soloable. It's a co-op game, so you can play it alone. And I honestly don't remember what pushed me away from it. It may have been the price, which we'll get to, or it might have just been something else at the time. Caught my eye.
It was $95 for the game, $110 with shipping, and it said that it was going to retail for like $150. So I'm saving. Let me go for it.
Yeah, that tricky thing that Eagle Griffin does with their prices. So for me, this is a game. I got it out. I've played it, a handful of times now, and with people and by myself. Let's just say I wasn't expecting too much based on the game and the rules and everything that came with it. It looked like a fairly straightforward programming style co-op game. But when you know the price and you see the size of the board and you see the size of the box, I was expecting a little bit more. I think at that price range, you're talking about $150 MSRP. Even if nobody actually pays that much, you're still paying $100 or more for this game. And you do have certain expectations for how it's going to play. I don't feel like it does anything that revolutionary. The rotating board is interesting, and I haven't seen it in another game before, but I don't feel like it's something you couldn't emulate with some other style of board, nor do I feel like it makes the game so unique and so different that it's, stands alone on its own.
The games that I kind of remind me of were, and people have remarked Room 25 because of the vibe is the same, and also Burgle Brothers, the Tim Fowers game. And these games they're small, you're walking around, you're looking for guards, and kind of, you're also flipping tiles. That's the part that reminded me of those two games. You have to flip the tiles. Not everything is open at the beginning. So they remind me of those games. And I'm playing the Daedalus Sentence, and I'm like, okay, is this game different than those other two games? Those games that I spent, under $30 for? Not so much.
Yeah, and that's the tough part. And, you do have the little bit of difference there. And, the each level of this rotating board does change. And so maybe something that you need suddenly is in a different position, or suddenly some of these guards, these minotaurs, quote unquote, are right next to you. And you do have some control over that, obviously, with the programmable board, but it just doesn't give enough extra on top of those fairly straightforward mechanics that you find in a game like Burgle Brothers, which I love.
Right.
Like, I don't necessarily need that variability in where those tiles are sitting. And because of the way the programmable board works, and because of the nature of the goals on the board, it can take a really long time.
Ugh. Yeah, it was about an hour and a half to 2 hours our play, plus the teach, and that's too long to be doing the same thing. Like, when you're playing a big game, you want your personal either your person to grow in power or for the game itself to increase in options. Like, something has to grow. But like grow in complexity, grow in engagement. This game just adds more. And that more isn't like an upwards. It's just kind of like, here, have the board's going to spin more. And it creates more AP, and it creates more kind of like that draggy feeling because you're not really doing anything different. So the end game, like a game like this should climax. Like Spectre Ops is one of the most exciting games at the end that I've played because, you're running and whatever, about to escape and they're going to catch you. This game is like the board's going to spin here, and then you're going to move the piece there, and the creature's going to path over here, and you just get either caught in AP or you don't care. And that's not a good place to be.
Yeah, it really doesn't. Honestly, like the first 10 or 15 minutes of this game were great. The mechanics are fun. They just overstay their welcome by a lot. Because by the end, as you're saying, instead of doing one spin and one spawn on the board, you're doing, or one movement of the guards, you're doing 4 or possibly more, depending on how many cards you draw. And that's for every action you take, or every action, group you take. it just takes so long, you know? Like, especially if you know, I just need to go from point A to point B and avoid these guards. And you can see that that's going to take like 4 or 5 rounds. You just got to go through that every time. And it's a little bit worse with the multiplayer just because every player has fewer turns available to them, fewer actions available to them. So it takes longer to get anywhere. But it's a bit of a grind no matter how you're playing it.
Yeah, so I mean, I know, a nice thing to say is like, okay, it'd be a pretty good game if it wasn't for the price. It's not even that good, Even at $30, I'd be like, okay, I wouldn't be blown away by it because I've played these other games at $90 or $150. Pass.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think if this was somehow if they managed to make this game a $40 or $50 game, I would say give it a play maybe once. At this price point and for what you get out of it and for the comparisons there are to, less expensive games and at the same time equally expensive games with so much more to them, it's a dodge for me too. It's just not, I don't see myself playing it again. And I feel like if I put people through that again at game night, they would be upset with me. So that's never a good sign.
So let's talk about a game that is worth the money. At least according to me. I'm not sure how you feel about it yet.
Yeah. So this is the other one we mentioned at the top of the show that everybody knows about and that everybody tried to get and that you and I apparently got. So yay for getting through the server. And that's Mechs versus Minions. This is from Riot Games. So these are the guys who did League of Legends. And it kind of burst onto the scene about a month ago out of nowhere. They had this completely under wraps. Nobody had heard of it. It's not some major game designer, but they built this just ridiculously beautiful box full of cool stuff. And they basically sent it out to every major name in the hobby and then some, and launched everything in the same day, and it was everywhere. So if you logged into Board Game Geek that week, you saw this game. If you logged into Board Game Geek about 2-3 weeks ago, you saw this game too because everybody was complaining how they couldn't log onto the website to buy it.
Speaking of that, the game actually smashed the single week record for views. It was like 150,000 views.
Oh my god!
Which the record is like 70,000, like Scythe or something like that. This game doubled that on day of release.
Yeah, that is ridiculous, and it shows that this company obviously has been doing publicity and games for a long time, obviously in another niche, but they make a lot of money doing what they do, and they're very good at it. They put on events a lot. So it's interesting to see this kind of outside entity to come in and just show everybody in the board game hobby, like, this is how you launch a game. And it worked. And so the hype is real, and currently about 15,000 people have this game, and another 15,000 will be getting it next month sometime. And so we've both played it, and it's very interesting when you finally get into a game, especially when it's this hype, to actually play it and see what you're getting, and especially when the components are this good. Like, the quality of components in this box are among the best I've ever seen.
It's like a $300 game, like, yeah, you could easily pay like huge deluxe prices for this game.
Yeah, absolutely. If you took a small publisher and they were printing, if they were planning to print 5,000 copies of this, it would cost easily $200+ just because of what's in here. You have fully painted miniatures for the main character mechs. There's 4 of those. They inked every single one of the minions. So it's not just straight plastic. They have contours. They look amazing. They have these metal tokens to track kills as well as your levels, little crystal bits. The card quality is amazing. The board quality is amazing.
The cards are like the best cards I've ever felt in my life. It's like I felt giddy holding these cards. Sounds weird for a board game, but these component things like really matter. They really impact the way that you play. At least for me, I don't know what people are like. Oh well, don't worry about component quality. How does the game play? This game, the component quality is so good it adds to it. It makes you just happy playing this game.
That said, and that's not surprising. I mean, if you've seen any videos, you know what's coming in this box. But how does it actually play? And this is the interesting part because it could easily just be a very shiny, pretty game that with mediocre gameplay. But in reality, it's actually very good. 2 things that I wanted to touch on. First, the way the game is taught and the way you pick up new ideas and kind of work your way through the progression of the game concepts is fantastic. It's basically how you would do it in a video game, bit by bit, introducing new ideas and guiding somebody through it with a walkthrough that makes sense and doesn't require you to sit down for 45 minutes and read. You can do it as you're playing, which I think is fantastic. Second, there aren't that many mechanics in the game. Like, there aren't that many things to do. You know, you have those 6 rounds or 6 phases in the round. You're going to draft your cards, you're going to program, you're going to execute, and then the minions are going to go. And there's other stuff that comes in. You're going to do various different things throughout the game as you kind of build on that and unlock these new missions and different cards that come in these packets in the game. It's always fun when there's packets of stuff that you don't get to open for a set period of time. It's not a legacy game, but you do unlock stuff as you go. But none of that adds so much to the game that it's changing it in some groundbreaking way. It just kind of adds little bits and complexity to it. The result is a very streamlined, smooth, fun, and most importantly, easy to teach and pick up game. I don't even like programming games, and this one manages to overcome the reasons I don't, which is, for me, mind-blowing because it's probably the first game in this particular genre I've actually really liked.
I'm not a huge programming guy. Like, I don't like Robo Rally. Maybe I could like it, but I always have a bad experience with it. My robot gets pushed off the board, and it gets shot, and I'm useless for 10 rounds. So I came into it kind of trepidatious. On the other hand, Space Alert is one of my favorite games because I just like the way the programming does there. Blind programming, you kind of watch things fall apart, or it feels really good when you get it right. So I'm up and down. This was a neat wrinkle. It really was, because you only have 12 cards. That's it. And the 12 cards, you can turn, you can move forward, you can shoot stuff. And but you can stack them. So that's what they did. Like, you can stack different color cards together so that your turning and moving become more powerful. You can replace, you can scrap cards to heal. Those 12 cards, they turn that base into like a really rich experience. That's different. It sticks out compared to the Daedalus Sentence because you're doing the same stuff in the Daedalus Sentence all the time for the hour and a half, 2 hours you're playing. This game, each different mission puts a different challenge for you. It puts a different spin on your resources. So you have the same resources, but you got to deploy them in a completely different way from mission to mission, which that's really good. Like, that, they really nailed that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just, anytime you're able to take familiar mechanics and make them new and exciting, you've succeeded in the design of the game. And I think that's what they've done here. And you have other things too. Like when you first start playing the game, each character is the same, but then they have kind of these special abilities that unlock as you get further along, schematic cards that come with some of the missions, overdrive abilities once you start killing enough minions, stuff that makes it feel unique to you. So as a group game, brilliant. The thing I was really interested in is the fact it's cooperative. So it's a cooperative programming game. Everybody's working towards the same goal. And because it's cooperative, we all know what that means. You can play it by yourself. I was a little nervous about that just because of the programming aspect and keeping track of all those cards. And I guess depending on how many characters you want to play and how you want to do that. How did you find that?
It's a little cumbersome as a solo, be honest. It's just a lot of moving parts. Like, you got to play with at least 2, which is all right, whatever. But that's a little bloated because the boards are big and they're big in front of you. And then you have to control all of the minion movements by yourself between your moves. So when you're playing a solo game, you kind of want to, like, Mage Knight's great with this. You're not, there's no board movement. It's just discs that are sitting there and you're looking at your cards and you're moving and you're doing your thing. This game, there's a lot of, okay, where is this minion going? I roll the die. And so that part made it maybe kind of took it a notch down as a solo. So that's honestly my only complaint about it. And they said, look, it's the play count is 2 to 4. So they're saying, like, it's almost like play solo at your own peril. but soloable, and it's fun. If you can go overcome that barrier of all the stuff you have to do in order to make the game work that isn't necessarily playing the game, if you just overcome that, then yeah, it's really good.
All right, cool. So those are 2 really big games, and the thing that strikes me the most about these two games, we'll just kind of jump into the next segment here, is Mechs vs. Minions was $75. And now I'm not going to pretend that that's a reasonable price for any other publisher to put out a game at this quality, because no other publisher could afford to do it. They printed 30,000 copies of this to get the price to that point, and they probably didn't make much money, if any, on this. But it's still really hard to reconcile, especially having played both of these games in the same week, Mechs vs. Minions and the Daedalus Sentence. Components, obviously, that there's a huge gap there. But even beyond that, like gameplay-wise, there just wasn't as much development in the Daedalus. You look at the rulebook, and you look at the sameness of the game as you progress, and it's hard to say, like, how could anybody want to spend this much for this and then say this is too much money? So that's what we kind of wanted to talk about, is relative value of these big games, kind of where they sit, and which ones we think are worth it.
Right. So I basically come up with two general kind of criteria for what I'm going to look for now after the Daedalus Sentence experiment. So component quality and replayability. So, I mean, component quality, it's hard to look at the pictures and it's hard to look at those little videos because they don't really tell you a lot. But that has to, if I'm going to spend $80+ in a game, I need boards that are sturdy. I need cards that feel good. I need bits that look like something, that evoke something. They're not just, kind of blobs sitting there. Like, that has to be really top notch. Like, I'm raising my standard on that. I mean, are you a component guy?
Yeah. I mean, I think, I'm not, it doesn't bother me quite as much. Like, Chris will frequently get very upset if the quality of components is low enough. It doesn't matter how good the gameplay is. And, sometimes I feel that way, sometimes I don't. But it really depends on the quality of the game and how much it matters. But the problem for me playing solo games is if the component quality is bad, or if it's low quality, especially on like the cards, solo games get played a lot. Probably more than regular multiplayer games, because you can play them as many times as you want. So if those cards start to chip after 3 or 4 plays, that's not good. And that'll upset me pretty quickly, because I know after 20 or 30 plays, it's going to look bad. Yeah,
the card shuffle, you know what's coming because you know which cards are marked, and the dice rolling starts to be a little bit iffy, and it's just a bad scene.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm definitely with you on that front. And when you're spending this much money, you just want it to look good. I'm not saying everybody should be able to make a game like Mechs vs. Minions for $75. It's, again, not going to happen. But when you have a game like Scythe, that cost less than $100 via Kickstarter, he didn't expect to have to print that many copies of the game, and he still managed to keep the price where it is. You have a game like Mansions of Madness, 2nd edition. I know it's from a slightly larger company, but it's still within the hobby. Lots and lots of stuff in that box, fully developed app that comes for free. There are games that can give you a lot of value for the money without the component quality dropping.
Right. Like, and I think, like, the sturdiness of it is a really great point. We love our solo games, and if you lay like these big games we're talking about, if you lay them out, they're gonna sit there. So even just them being out in the world for a couple days, the cat's gonna crawl on them. Life is gonna happen to these games. You want them to be able to withstand all that.
Yeah, I mean, like, I have Mechs vs. Minions sitting here set up for about 3 or 4 days, and multiple times one of my children came in and grabbed one of the miniatures off the table. And they're all still in one piece. And so, which is more than I could say for some other games that have gotten the same treatment. So it is nice to know, without having to worry about it, that it's probably going to be able to withstand just everyday use. And I'm not saying, a 2-year-old ripping game pieces off the table is everyday use, but stuff like that happens. You got cats, you got kids.
Like, it is. I would argue, like, a lot of the people that are playing solo games are family people, and they have kids. Like, they're playing solo games because they can't get out to the game store and everything. So, yeah, I mean, kids doing stuff, drink spilling, just life happening. I almost want game publishers to kind of think about that in a more conscious way, as opposed to just kind of putting this stuff out there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a good point, because my games go through a lot at home. I don't think my stuff's, I keep it in fairly good condition as much as I can, but some of these boxes are a little battered. Some of the games have gone through some things. The one game that I played the most with my son when he was little, Imperial Settlers, is now all sleeved and carefully packed up because he would grab cards and bend them and do stuff to them that I really didn't want him to do. And that's a game with a fairly decent quality components. But if you have slightly worse components, like a kid flipping a card across the table or knocking stuff on the floor and then instantly it's scratched up or scuffed, that's I feel like that's something we can avoid, in this day and age with the quality of manufacturing where it's at and the availability of those resources. There's no reason for something to be that cheap.
And then the second part that I'm going to look for now in these big purchases is replayability. And I think that comes in two shapes, really. One would be a campaign mode. So Descent or Mansion of the Madness, like you mentioned, Mechs vs. Minions, they're constantly giving you like episodes of a story, and it kind of adds that propulsive quality that makes you want to play. So I'm not just going to buy this and it's going to sit on the shelf. I'm going to want to play this and see what happens or explore the game and whatever. Failing that, at least give me a crap load of options. Mentioned Terraforming Mars, right? I mean, Terraforming Mars has what, 250 cards or something? You can play all sorts of permutations of that game, and it's going to be different each time. So there's no campaign mode in that, but you can play it a lot, and it's going to be different because of so many options, right? So if it's not, so when I'm looking for a big purchase, I'm definitely going to look for either one of those things, preferably both. But we can't be greedy.
Yeah. It's not every game's going to be able to hit every mark. I'm 100% with you on that. I think for me, there's three areas that are important. You've got either something story-based and ongoing with a campaign, like you said, which I think I own too many of those at this point, and they always have such beautiful miniatures. And then there's the puzzle aspect. So we talked about the Oniverse last week or 2 weeks ago, game like Friday, like things where you're trying to build something based on unique variables that are given to you, and it's the same every time, but you're still trying to solve something. It's it's like one of those apps where you lose 95% of the time, but you're just trying to get a little bit further, a little bit better than you were before. That's a unique ongoing challenge. And then, like you said, the variability. So you have Terraforming Mars. I mentioned Imperial Settlers, which has hundreds of cards to choose from now. Games like that I really like too, because Terraforming Mars I've played probably 15 times in the last 2 months solo. Every single play has been very, very different. There's some cards that come out now that I'm like, have I seen this before? And I've played it a lot. So that is fantastic. And any game that manages to do that and has a solo mode is automatically on my list.
Yeah, and Terraforming Mars, that's not a cheap game. Like that is, I think the component quality is pretty good. I kind of like the metal cubes of something, and then other stuff isn't so great. But what are we talking on that game? 60 plus, 70 plus if you're going online, more if you're just retailing it.
Yeah, I think it's 70 MSRP, and then you can, if it's ever in stock, you can grab it for 45 online. But yeah, I mean, that one's a great example. Like, I personally have issues with some of the components in graphic design, and I just don't care because the game is great. It doesn't matter what those issues are. And I've upgraded some of the components that I had issues with. So that's something that I've felt worth investing in because the game was that good.
Yeah, so those are kind of my lessons learned on big purchases.
Yeah, so I mean, I think this is a fair question, and it's something I think a lot of us grapple with, because there are those big games that come out sometimes that look really cool. You can play it by yourself, but it's really hard to justify spending like $100 on a game that you're going to play alone at home, especially when you have $25, $30 games like Onirim that you can go pick up and play 100 times.
And they keep coming. Like with that, Dark Souls just finished it. Well, not just finished, but finished early in the year. I could think that's going to be heavy on the component quality side of things. And Deepest Darkness or whatever, the follow up to Zombicide. Just a ton of games that, $100, $150 just hitting Kickstarter all the time. So I feel like maybe a couple years ago we were getting a lot of micro games, the Love Letters and Elk. And now I feel like we're in the revenge of the big box game.
Yeah, they're back. And they want your money.
Yes.
All right. So that is our coverage of these big, meaty games and what's worth it and what's not. I think it's safe to say that we feel Mechs versus Minions is well worth it, whereas the Daedalus Sentence comes up a little bit short. Be interested to hear what everybody else out there thinks, and I'll post this as one of the questions of the day and a couple posts on the social media. But is there a game that you feel is worth it that costs, let's say, $80 or that is just 100% worth it, no questions asked, as a solo game? And then are there any that you've picked up that you now regret that are not worth it in your eyes? I'll be interested to see how many answers I get to each of those questions. We can have a little contest to see which one comes out ahead. That's going to be everything for this week. Jason, thank you again for coming on. This is a lot of fun.
As always, thank you.
So that's everything for this week. Make sure you head over to Facebook, check out our daily posts there, as well as Twitter at BGA Podcast. BoardGamersAnonymous.com, you're going to find all of the recent posts for this podcast, as well as Board Gamers Anonymous, and some write-ups and reviews of other games that I've been playing lately, including a full written review of Daedalus Sentence, which should be out shortly before this episode airs. So you can go over there and read a little bit more about my thoughts on that game and see some photos. And then, if you haven't yet, please stop by iTunes, leave us a review, let us know what you think. Really, really appreciate the feedback. And even just a quick 5-star rating helps to kind of boost the rating of this podcast and help more people find it. But until next time, that is everything, and I will save you a seat at this table for one.
Later, everybody.